Okay.
So welcome to Baseball and Coffee with Tino and Aaron. It is Super Bowl Sunday. The Rams just won. And we are going to cover shortstops today. How you doing, Aaron?
We're doing well. It's been a busy week.
Mhm.
I'm excited to talk shortstops.
Sweet. Me too.
I've had a lot of fun in this draft with you this week as well.
Yeah, me too. So we're going to cover today. We're going to start with some introductions, some coffee thoughts. We'll move into our shortstop rankings, kind of our typical framework, talk about redraft rankings, dynasty rankings, risers and fallers, prospects, and then close it with some open forum questions. But to get started, Aaron and I are drafting a team together in NFBC, and it's been a lot of fun. And for me, it's more about kind of process and getting inside the mind of another fantasy player that I respect. And it's been a lot of fun. And I'm actually really excited about our team thus far. Aaron, you want to talk a little bit about what we've done up to this point?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's the NSBC. It's the first time I've dipped my toe in that. It's a draft and hold. So we're drafting 50 players, no waiver wire pickups during the season. So your team is your team, traditional 5x5. And, my interest in it was twofold. I think one, coming out of this podcast and these discussions we've been having and really going through the player pool, wanting to put some of that knowledge and into practice. And we're playing dynasty baseball as we do. There's just a limited amount of opportunity we have to roster and build around a lot of these players that we've been discussing together. So it really intrigued me to again just try to take the knowledge that and learnings I've had with you and apply it. And then also the NFBC is, the larger community that we're a part of in terms of the fantasy baseball community, the people that we read and the podcasts we listen to. They play and you hear them talking about it, and there's just a natural curiosity, and I think that's what led me to it firstly. So yeah, I approached Tino about it and I said, hey, would you want to do this with me? And it's been great because I think like you said, I appreciate what you said about like getting in the mind of someone else. I think from these discussions, we have overlap, and then sometimes we have differences. And I think we always do. I appreciate that's one of my favorite things about these conversations is that I come away, whether or not you change my mind or whatever, like just hearing your another person's opinion who I value, perspective on a player. I just think it's good. It stretches me. And this process has been just more of that. So just to recap on what we did so far, you want to do that? So it was a Kentucky Derby style. So we were able to do our draft preferences. So Tino and I talked about, wanting to get one of the top 7 players. So our number one KDS spot was 7. To try to make sure that we got one of those, as we saw, elite players, and that was the spot that we got. So drafting in the 7th spot out of 12, we drafted Ronald Acuna in the first round. Came back with Freddie Freeman in the 2nd, and then Bogarts and Presley in the 3rd and 4th, so a shortstop and a closer. And then in the middle rounds, in the 5th, we drafted Will Smith, and then back to back, we drafted starting pitchers Musgrove and Dylan Cease. And then we shifted to 3rd and grabbed Bregman. And then we took Carlos Correa as the next pick, which is not planned, but Tino had spotted the value and we leaned into it, and we ended up taking him there. So we actually took a middle infielder before we took a lot of other positions, but he was just too good to pass up, and we felt like we got a great value. And then picked up Yu Darvish as our 3rd starter, and then our last 2 picks have been Kyle Schwarber and Brian Hayes. So that's where we stand. So still haven't drafted a second baseman as of yet. We have plans to address that. We have Schwarber and Acuna in the outfield, so I feel like we have a good power base out there. So it's been fun. I think. How's it been for you so far?
It's been great. I think that it's been the kind of the traditional way that I would want to build a team as far as building OPS across the board in the beginning, and maybe not jumping on a top 5 pitcher necessarily, but depending or leaning on our ability to understand what pitchers are coming and where we can find value with starting pitching. And I think my one blind spot at times can be steals. I don't value speed in the same way that I think others might, especially this year when you're talking about consensus and what some of the other pods are talking about. It's speed all the time. And I don't always see it that way. I'd rather build with 10 steals here and 15 steals there. And to me, OPS is always king because it hits runs, it hits homers, it hits RBIs. No, it doesn't hit RBIs directly, but in theory it does. And I think we have a really great base as far as OPS goes. We do have to build in some speed. I really like the Ke'Bryan Hayes pick as a corner infielder because I think he's going to provide us with some speed at a less traditional position. What I was going to ask you is, do you have a favorite pick and a least favorite pick so far?
It's tough.
So I can go. My 2 favorite picks are, believe it or not, Acuna is one of them, and Bregman is the other. I think when I look at Acuna's numbers deeper, and he's just, every metric is incredible with Ronald Acuna. And I don't expect him to steal the same amount of bags as he has historically, given that he's coming off of a leg injury, but he hits the ball harder than everybody else. And he's got a great eye, and he's 23 years old. He's just, I don't know. I think we got lucky. And I think he comes back and recovers and kind of takes that spot of being a top 2 or 3 fantasy player, maybe the top fantasy player this year. And we got him at number 7. The other one for me is Bregman. If you look at Alex Bregman's 2018, 2019 seasons, he's a phenomenal talent and takes walks like we like, plays in a great offense like we like. A little bit of a risk in that he had a wrist injury last year and he may not come back with the same sort of power and pop that he had in the past. But if he does, or even if he comes back at 85% what he was, we got a steal where we got him. So those are my 2 favorite picks. What about you?
I think my cop-out answer is all my picks are favorite picks, because I think what I've been proud of is we've consistently tried to find value on the board, starting with Acuna in the first. We saw, he's pretty sure going to be a top 4 or 5 player, and we got him at 7. And I think we've done that all along. We've really looked at the value on the board and then looked at what we value and what we build. I think if I had to say picks that I don't like, I still look at the 4th and 5th round picks, taking a closer and a catcher. And I think, what if one of those was a Buxton, how would that change our outfield? Or, if we had grabbed that outfield too, or maybe if we had grabbed, I'm just picking names off that, like Ketel Marte at 2nd, and we had that 2nd spot locked down, or, it's hard to give up the opportunity to give up a premium hitter, but at the same time, I remember with Will Smith specifically, I was struggling we were both aligned that we have to bite the bullet and get a closer in this format because we will not have the opportunity to pick up the guys who emerged during the season. So having someone who has the skills and has security, and we decided on Presley. It's just kind of the cost of doing business with Will Smith. He was just so far and away the most valuable player on the board, but it's still hard to give up the everyday bat in another spot. But
we're talking about catcher Will Smith.
Catcher Will Smith, yes, right. Exactly. Yeah, good.
Not rapper.
But yeah, those are the picks I look back and I still kind of question what could we have got there instead. So I guess they're my least favorite.
Sure.
But I stand by the process of what we were trying to do and what we were trying to build.
Right. Well, it's rough because you don't. At least for me, my perspective, closers, I don't know that I care too much about closers. It's more of like it's just a necessity, right? But it still is a
Mhm.
category, and it's still something you have to focus on. And you don't want to. I'd much rather have Byron Buxton on my team than Presley. But the reality is we have to find a closer, and he was the best closer available at that particular point in time. To, like you said, it's the cost of business, right? It's what you have to do in order to play. And with Will Smith at catcher, we may have been able to find a decent value in pairing a couple of catchers down the road, or having, since it's a two catcher format, maybe having three catchers that we could rotate, say a Zanino and a Narvaez and a Mitch Garver or something like that. But in having Will Smith, we can kind of lock that position down and walk away and worry about supplementing later. And
Yeah.
the value was just too much. So it's not sexy. It's not fun. I hate closers. I punt saves when it's applicable, and it's come back to bite me quite a bit. But in this league, I think we're both trying to take the approach more of what's the right thing to do, as opposed to what is the thing that we are most excited about doing. I think there's a big difference between those two things, and it's a way for us to learn how to, I think, make objective and less emotional and less biased decisions. And we hold each other accountable. What's interesting to me is we hold each other accountable to making decisions that are based on research and that are based on what's best for the team, versus I really want to watch this guy for 162 games, and so I'm going to take him knowing that he's probably not the perfect pick for me to take right now.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's I've really enjoyed that portion of it. And yeah, I like our team all around. I like the Schwarber pick, was awesome. The Ke'Bryan Hayes pick, I think we're doing a really good job of creating a really good baseline of stats, and adding players with upside where we can, right? So Ke'Bryan Hayes, if he gives us double-digit steals and double-digit homers, we're good. But he has the potential to be a much better player than that if he can elevate the ball a little bit, right? So he's got upside potential. And Bregman has, if Bregman is a top 6, top 7 third baseman, that's fine, but he has the potential to be the best third baseman in the game. And we wouldn't be surprised if that happened, right? With our pitchers, Dylan Cease, I think, was a little rich for Cease, just given what he's done up to this point. But we weren't getting him in the next round, given what other players understand about his peripheral stats. And he's an exciting one for me. Musgrove is incredibly, I think, underrated. And Darvish is the right type of pick to pick number 3 to support some of that upside that we were looking at before that. So no, I'm excited. I think this is going to be a really great team. We need a little bit more speed. We need to find the second closer. We definitely need to have a plan for our second catcher position. But I'm confident we can find outfield. We can find fillers for the outfield, 3, 4, and 5 positions, and certainly the back end of our pitching staff that's kind of the stuff that we specialize in finding. So I think we should be good there. Yeah, it's been awesome. It's been awesome.
Cool.
Any one quick thought before we get to our coffee thoughts for the week. I saw today that Calvin Jones, who was an old Seattle Mariners reliever, passed away today. I bring him up because he was a pitcher for the Mariners during the time that my friends and I played dynasty baseball. And he was one of those players that we all, my best friend Jason and I enjoyed quite a bit. He threw fastball, forkball, mid-90s, nasty forkball, drafted from Compton, California. So he's from the hood, which was something we both related to and enjoyed, but he passed today. So I just wanted to quick shout out to Calvin Jones. There were no trades in our fantasy league this week, I believe. Is that right?
Correct. I checked before we started. Looks like the last one was your Brady House pick.
That's right.
Which I don't know that we discussed, but I can't remember if that was in this last week or not.
No, we didn't discuss. That was just Brady House was on the borderline of me keeping kind of 16, 17. We keep 15. Super high upside. Wouldn't surprise me to see him hit 40 home runs. as a third baseman, but I'm trying to win this year. And so if I can extract any kind of value out of him, even if it's moving up a couple of rounds, I would. So I traded him to Matt. Coffee, anything fun this week?
Yeah,
Thoughts?
I had a really rare coffee from Vietnam last night that I really enjoyed. Vietnam, for those people who are listening who know coffee, they typically grow Robusta coffee, just a lower quality coffee. But I had an Arabica Vietnam Starbucks Reserve. It's just really lovely. It's been I can't remember the last time I had Vietnam because they're quite rare. So
Yeah.
really loved it. Just notes of vanilla, really silky body, and just really drinkable. It's really enjoyable.
Nice.
Highly recommend trying one if you ever see an Arabica Vietnam.
So I have a quick, so I've been drinking the same naturally processed Nicaraguan coffee that I had. It's been great. It's changed quite a bit over the course of the last week or so. My question for you is, at what point, like what's your optimal window for coffee consumption off of roast typically? I know it changes from roast profile to roast profile, but what is kind of your standard window that you look for?
Yeah, I would give it at least 4 or 5 days. Unless I'm doing a press, that's a little bit more forgiving.
Sure. So it's interesting because my girlfriend, who is not a coffee snob, nor is she a coffee professional, has made comments to me about coffees that we've consumed recently being, you know, not liking that coffee, or what happened to that coffee, or did they screw it up, and wanting to buy something different. And I've said, like, what you have or what you consume, say day 5 or day 7, is going to be completely different day 14. And the rate at which we consume coffee is, we don't drink it fast enough to really drink it within that that window of, you know, that we're looking for. And so it's just been interesting to me to watch the reaction of someone who hasn't worked in the industry, really see the same coffee as two very, very different products based on roast time. One thing I used to do that was a lot of fun was I used to like to try to pull espresso with really freshly roasted coffee, because you could get incredibly bright, especially when they're, you know, kind of more of like a city roast. You know, you get some really bright flavors and interesting, almost like juice, right? Almost like this viscous, you know, berry juice, or, you know, grapefruit, by pulling it as espresso really, really early on. And for me, the later on we got in the roast, the more it was, you know, like right now, my Nicaragua tastes like anything else. You can't tell it's natural. You can't tell it's really anything special, just because it's, you know, it's 14 days at this point in time. But I just think it's an interesting conversation to have. You know, what's your target?
I wonder what it is. I mean, it's the gas that's trapped inside there. You know, we call it degassing for a reason. And I wonder what it is about those gases that, you know, obviously change the I want to say immersion. That's not the right word. The extraction, pardon me.
Right.
You know, between the surface of the coffee and the water, it's there's more air in there.
I think it's the oxidizing process, right? So it's like anything else, right? If you take spices as an example, spices are going to be much more intense when they are when you have them fresh versus something that's oxidized and sat around for a while. I assume it's a very similar process, but interesting to me. I'll still drink it. It's got caffeine. I'm good to go. But just I don't know. That was been my coffee experience for the week. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll come right back with our shortstop rankings. All right, we're back. About to jump into our shortstop redraft top 16. Aaron, I assume we have the same shortstop at number 1.
We do. I would assume so as well.
I would hope so.
Tier of 1 for me for Tatis.
Me as well. what is it that you see in Tatis? I guess the more interesting question is, what do you see this next upcoming year, and what do you see for him, say, in 5 years?
Yeah. Just real quick before I talk about Tatis, my overall review of the position led me to value power, home runs specifically, and RBI. Those were the categories where you really are differentiated if you have a player who really performs in that area at this position. And that just reinforced how I viewed him specifically, because that is what he brings in spades, is the power that he brings. I mean, he has legitimate 45 to 50 home run power anytime he's healthy and playing. And there's just currently no one else in the field that brings that, and that's the ultimate weapon.
Right.
You know, I don't want to belabor the health concerns, because everyone can get hurt. I think we talk about where he would be 5 years from now. I mean, I don't say it's a shame. I mean, it's just a reality that we know that he has this shoulder issue. So I just hope that it's a short-term thing, and as he grows older, you know, it becomes less of an issue, because he's such a talent. And it would be great to see him have a full career where that doesn't limit him.
Right.
But there, we could think of players, I'm sure, who, maybe not have had his ceiling, but have an immense talent, and the injuries, it's part of pro sports, that are not quite able to realize their full potential, or maybe do it for as long as we envision them. But I hope that's not the case for him.
I think he may. It's interesting because with the it looks like the approval of the DH in the NL, I think a player like Tatis can his longevity and his ability to stay healthy over the course of the year should change, right? If you can convince him to DH, say 40% of the time right now, or even 30% of the time in 2022, and moving down the line, you increase that a little more. I think you just extract that much more value from him by getting him to just hit. That's the whole point in moving him to the outfield, is to get him to not dive so much and not have so much wear and tear on that left shoulder. And if he can DH, I think he's that much more valuable if his bat is in the lineup for 150 games. I don't know if you looked at his bat X projections for next year, specifically the one where they kind of build it out for a full season. They're seeing 50 plus home runs and 40 plus steals. And that's the kind of talent that he has. I was just looking at some of his other metrics, and he swings hard, he strikes out, he runs faster than everyone else, he's has more power than everybody else. He's a super, I don't know, to me, him and Acuna are the two most exciting players in baseball right now. And I think he's head and shoulders above any of the other shortstops. And to your point about the shortstop position, I look at the shortstop position, I see Tatis and Bichette and Bogaerts, Story, depending on where he goes, Correa without steals, Lindor, depending on where he hits. I think Seager will hit in the middle of the lineup. But really, after those guys, that's about it. When you're looking for home runs and RBIs, you can get steals from some other players, and you can get some home runs from other players. But as far as that kind of production, where they're giving you, 5 categories or even 4, even if it's minus steals like a Correa or a Seager or a Bogaerts, you're just not getting that kind of run production and RBI production from the rest of the shortstop position. So yeah, I agree. I think he's my number 1 pick overall, given position and kind of upside for if he plays a full 140, 150 games. He's 40, 30, almost guaranteed.
Yeah, that's almost a floor, which is unheard of.
Are there any reasons to hesitate in making Tatis your number 1 shortstop, or your kind of number 1, 2, 3, or 3 overall pick?
I don't think so. I mean, I've heard people make the Trey Turner safety argument. And I think certainly if you value the volatility, if you're looking to, I'm going to make the safest pick possible
Mhm,
in the first round, I can understand that logic. For me,
mhm.
if you have 1-1 and you're trying to win the league, I don't think there's that much of a pronounced risk where, you know what I mean? Like he
Mhm.
finished the season on the field. Again, we know it's something that he has to work through, but I was looking at his, you mentioned the bad X, so I pulled up my spreadsheet with the bad X, and it's
Mhm.
he and Vlad and Shohei are the three players that are projected
Are
for
off the
just
charts.
uber power.
Right.
And you got a first baseman and a DH, and he plays shortstop. So
Right.
I mean, it's just such an advantage.
I would take 125 games of Tatis over potentially over like 140 games of Turner. That's
Hmm.
just me. I know that there are people, like you said, I know there are people who prefer Turner over Tatis, but
Hmm.
he's so explosive. And, you know, to me, predictability doesn't, it depends on where you pick and it depends on how you pick in rounds like 2 through 10, whether predictability is what you want. But Tatis can win the league for you single-handedly as long as you don't screw up those other picks, right? And so
Hmm.
he would be my pick. 21% bail rate, 56% hard hit. Like kind of that's all that really needs to be said.
Yep.
And
I
a
mean,
90 plus sprint speed, right? It's he's just a different athlete. A lot of fun. So your next tier, how does that start?
Tino, can we pause? Someone's at the door. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
All right, great.
So
Yeah,
tier
so
two.
picking it back up, I apologize. My tiers are a little weird,
Mhm,
but as I looked at trying to rank this position, I actually have another tier of one. I had Trey Turner in that tier.
sure.
Just because from a skills perspective, he was so different from my next group. I had a
Mhm,
hard time assimilating it, and his value was also uh, significantly higher based
mhm.
on what his expected production. Um, you know, so yeah, I mean that's what I have in tier two. So I'll throw it back to you before I
Sure.
talk about what I see in Turner.
Sure. So I had Turner as a second baseman. You can go ahead and speak to Turner if you like.
Yeah, for sure. That's right. I forgot that you had done that. So when I look at his projections, they have him for 28 home runs. I'm not sure that that's not his ceiling. He certainly turned himself into a really professional hitter.
Mhm,
And with his elite speed, he adds a lot of hits just on miss hits. And anything on the ground that's not right to someone, he can turn it into a hit. So,
mhm,
he's a threat to league and batting average, and his elite speed obviously is a tool that really carries him and serves him with stolen bases as well. And he's going to be in the middle of a productive lineup, so he's going to help you with counting stats. I guess where I question his continued elevation is just, in the power rate. Certainly, his quality of contact is good.
mhm.
Um, his launch angle has gotten progressively better. Again, I think it's just a credit to him that he's continued to work on his hitting, and it shows. But I'm not sure that we haven't maybe seen his best power season already,
Mhm.
um, and that it's going to continue to taper or kind of level off and may not quite meet everyone's expectations. But
Right.
I think he's a quality player to build around.
Sure. I definitely I agree. I think last year was his career year. I'd be surprised if it wasn't his career year. I think playing for the Dodgers is going to change his runs potentially. It'll be interesting to see if the Dodgers encourage him to run in the same way as he did with the Nationals. But yeah, he's a phenomenal player for sure. Um, and I think the predictability and the balance that he provides you is incredibly valuable. I think that if the choice again, if the choice for me is Tatis or Turner, I'm taking Tatis. But that's no knock on Turner at all.
Correct. Yeah, I would agree.
Right. So who's your next shortstop? And is it the starting of another tier?
Yeah, so I have three short stops in my next tier.
Mhm,
The way I organize this, these two players are really similar to me. They are just more balanced power hitters. And again, looking at the way I've evaluated this position and the value that these players bring,
Mhm,
I felt they were a step above what
mhm,
you could get in the following tier. And this is going to be backwards to where most people have this, but I have my next tier is Bogarts, Seager, and Correa in that order.
mhm.
All these
100%.
players are not going to help you in
Oh,
steals, and that's why they get pushed down. But they're all in their peak, age 27 to 29, all of them with OBPs north of 360, all of them with well above average barrel rates, um, and in the high 20s in home runs and run production in the middle of lineups.
mhm,
So I have Correa fifth. He is projected for the lowest OPS. However, he's still with his bat profile. I felt he belonged in this group,
mhm,
even at the tail end. Seager, he leads this group in barrel rate, exit velocity on flies and liners, the lowest strikeout rate, and the highest expected OBP. But he's also plays for the worst team. And while he has all of the underlying skills, I think he's probably the best pure quote hitter at the position. While he's not, has nobody needs the power of Tatis, he's just a great hitter. And that
mhm.
shows up in his skills. But again, he's going to a poorer team. And he also has failed to realize his full potential. He's always had that in him, but he doesn't have 120 RBI season. He doesn't have a 40 home run season. So he may never capitalize on his skill. But I just see premium batter in a premium spot and premium and with power again that I'm placing on the position. And Xander has the strongest track record
Mhm.
of these three of production, premium production and run production and power, and puts up all the skills to back it. So, to me, if I was building a team, I would place these three at a higher value, even though it would mean I would be giving up a few steals, but I feel I'd be getting an advantage
Mhm.
in home runs and OPS over my competition.
Where's Bo Bichette fall?
He's at the top of my next tier, and I will speak to that when we get there.
Cool. I was wondering if you were thinking it was Dante and he was retired, given given his place, but I can appreciate that. So a couple things. I love it. And I specifically love Seager, but he's not healthy. And he has never really been healthy. And he's going to a park that suppresses power. And so, man, he's one of those that it's going to be so interesting because all of his underlying metrics say like he's a superstar, right? Everything, hard hit, like contact rate. He's a phenomenal hitter, but he's in a park that's not favorable to left-handed hitters. He's in an offense that doesn't have a whole lot. There's not a whole lot of guys that are going to get on base in front of him unless, Willie Calhoun becomes a star and Josh Young comes up and plays a great third base. And Marcus Semien is, more Dunedin and Buffalo than he is Toronto and Oakland. So initially I had Seager third and I moved him all the way down to, what is that, seventh, based on
Okay.
based on some of the concerns. He's one
Yeah.
that I would take earlier than seventh because I believe in the tools and the skills, but it makes me nervous. I have Bichette in a tier of his own in tier two, mostly because of the speed. I hate the profile. Like the profile is so not me. It's not the profile that I'm attracted to. It's 6% walk rate. It's 20% K rate, 10% barrel rate, chase rate of 43%. Like that's not the kind of player that I really ever roster, to be honest with you. I want the selective hitter who knows what he's looking at, who takes walks, who gives me a chance to score runs and steal a couple of bags because he takes walks. But Bichette's statistics are too hard to, they're too difficult to ignore. I see 100 runs, 100 RBIs, 30 home runs, and 20 steals. And whether I agree with or love his advanced metrics or not, whether they fit the typecast of the profile that I love, he's still going to perform. and he's still in a great offense. The one knock against him outside of the chase rate and the walk rate is that he played in parks that were so favorable to hitters last year. That's the one reason why, I see him going as high as kind of mid to low first round in a redraft. To me, it's way too high. Given the parks that he played in and the volatility of a player who chases that many pitches and doesn't take walks, we could see a year where he hits 240 with 25 home runs, and no one would really blink an eye because he has that kind of approach. He could also hit 300 with 35 home runs and 30 steals, and nobody blink an eye either. But he's my number 2, mostly because of the speed. And then I clump Bogaerts, Correa, Seager, kind of in the same group, similar skill set. Now, I also included in that same tier 3, Trevor Story, Francisco Lindor, and Tim Anderson. So I have 6 players, 6 shortstops in my tier 3. The order for me is Bogaerts at 3, Story at 4, Correa at 5, Lindor at 6, Seager at 7, and Tim Anderson at 8. Quickly, Bogaerts is just a metronome. He's consistent. He's going to give you 290, 25 home runs, 90 RBIs, 90 runs, 5 to 10 steals every single year. I think we underrate him because we expected him to be a little bit better than that when he came up. I think we expected 300 with 30 home runs and 100 RBIs and 100 runs, and he's just slightly worse. But because we had higher expectations than where he's leveled out, I think he tends to get underrated. Trevor Story, we don't know where he's going to end up. He certainly was a beneficiary of hitting in cores, but he's also guaranteed 2020. He was not good last year, really, by Trevor Story standards, and he still was 2020. So those 20 steals to me are worth a ton. Carlos Correa is my number 5. He's very similar to Bogaerts. I think he has more upside potential than Bogaerts does, but because we don't know where he's going to play and we don't know the offense that he's going to play in, he's my number 5. Francisco Lindor is my number 6. I toyed with the idea of ranking him as high as number 3. When you look at Lindor's advanced metrics, he's not that different than he was in previous years. He had quite a bit of bad luck. And he's a player that if I can get him as the number 6 shortstop, I would be absolutely ecstatic. I don't know that he's going to return to peak Francisco Lindor, but I would take Francisco Lindor as the 6th shortstop before I would take Bogaerts as the 3rd shortstop. We talked about Seager. He's my number 7. Tim Anderson's my number 8. He's ran some incredibly high BABIPs over the last 3 years. He's been a 2020 guy pretty consistently the last couple of years. I still believe in his BABIP. I think that he hits the ball really hard and he's fast. And I understand that he's probably going to hit 300 and also understand the value of that in fantasy. But as he gets older, his speed is going to wane. And if he doesn't hit, or if he doesn't steal 20 bags, he's not worth where people are drafting him currently. I also think that if his speed wanes or drops off at all, his BABIP is going down. And so there's too much potential for him to kind of bottom out for me to rank him as high as some of the others are ranking him right now. I also, again, it's a profile. I like his profile less in that he doesn't walk and he swings at everything. I like his profile less than some of the other types of profiles that I had above him. So again, tier 3 for me after Tatis and Bichette. Tier 3 for me is Bogaerts, Story, Correa, Lindor, Seager, Anderson.
Great. So I think we're similar. Going back to Seager, and then we'll move on. I'd be curious to hear from you. I mean, last year he missed time because he got hit by a pitch. So when you see something like that and you're concerned about his health, like what exactly is the injury concern coming into this year? when a player has a broken hand from getting hit by a pitch?
I think it's less about the 1 year as opposed to it is that he hasn't really given us a full year in
Okay,
quite a while. Um,
that's fair. I'm just curious.
so
And I think for
I
me,
understand that being hit by a pitch is pretty random, right?
yeah,
And that makes sense. But if you haven't shown us a full year in your career other than the one, it's a reason kind of to ask questions.
hmm
Uh, and you know, it's if you take it from your own personal experience, like I'm the kind of person or athlete that doesn't ever break a bone. I always hurt. I'm always in pain. I'm always aching, but I can continue to go.
hmm
And I have friends who might be better athletes, but are breaking a bone and out for 3 months in our basketball league all the time.
mm
So I just think there are different types of body makeups and different types of profiles. There are guys who, you know, who play through aches and pains all the time, and you know they do. Mitch Haniger plays all the time unless he gets hit in the nuts. Right? Like, but he's a tough dude, and he plays
Yeah.
through pain. Like, you have players who play through pain and you don't. And Michael Jordan missed his second year for the most part, you know, with injury, but he was usually like a 75, 80 game player every single year because he was tough. It wasn't because he wasn't hurt. It was because that's his makeup. And so I see Corey Seager as more like a Ferrari. He's actually very much like a Ferrari. He has incredible tools, right? Ferrari can go 150 miles an hour, but it can break down on you in 2 seconds. I see Corey Seager as a little bit that way. The one thing that I love about his situation is that the investment in Corey Seager, the amount of money they're paying him, to me says they're going to do everything in their power to protect him and make sure his bat is in the lineup. So if he has to DH sometimes, if he has to take a day off sometimes, if the Rangers are concerned about his health at all and try to kind of manage that health a little bit, that's a plus because his tools are so good.
Yeah. And I will say too, I mean, I would definitely consider moving him down to 5 below Correa because of the environment, even though I think he's a better hitter. But I do think what you said about Texas lineup is legitimate. I ranked him over him at the moment just because right now we don't know where Correa is going to play. So if he lands in a plus offensive environment, I could easily see making that switch.
Right.
But I would stand with him in the top 5. So my next tier starting was with Bichette at 6, and then I have Lindor at 7, Anderson at 8, Wander Franco at 9, and then Story, Baez, Adames, and Swanson round out this tier. So the first 3 for me in this tier are guys who I'll swing a ton. Well, that's not true. Lindor is more selective, but I saw these guys as more, you know, low 20s home runs. They're going to steal bases. Their OBPs are lower. They're just very similar in terms of what you can expect and what you're going to. They're going to post a more, you know, like high 790s OPS. And with Bichette, you know, he posted an 8. What did he have last year? He had I
got it here. Hold on.
827.
Yep.
So he posted an 827, and he had, you know, that was his xLOG was only 490. So, and that was at the home run season. That's 29, where he played, like you said, in some of its offense environment. So I think we saw a power. Everyone's reacting as if we can expect a baseline of that power. I'm not sure if he's not more of a low 20s home runs. His launch angle, which is something I've gotten turned on to paying attention to due to you, is sub 10%. Now, when he does get the ball in the air, you know, he's hunting pitches, he swings a lot. He does so with good velocity. He does do well when he gets the ball in the air. But again, in terms of his velocity, but again, you know, he plays in a really great offensive environment, you know, so that's not changing.
He scored 100.
So I don't know.
He scored 121 runs last year.
Yeah. And again, I don't think that's necessarily going to change.
Right.
So it's.
But he's got, it was a 7.3 degree launch angle last year. And so to me, he got a little bit lucky in hitting as many home runs as he did. Yeah, I feel you. I completely.
And the steals too. I mean, what was he, 25 to 26 or something like that? And if you look at his success rate in the minors, he's never posted that. So, again, I know he's skilled. I know the offensive. I'm just not sure he's as good a hitter as the guys above.
Sure.
And so I'm hedging a little bit with my rank,
Sure.
but I do have him at the top of this tier because I do think he's clearly the best fantasy player of this group. Lindor, like you, I believe he's going to bounce back. Only 18.3% K rate, almost 350 OBP, a really balanced player, switch hitter. Good speed, decent power. I think we've seen his best power seasons, but I expect him to bounce back and produce a better season for the Mets. His barrel rate was almost 10% last year.
Right.
He didn't get much out of it. Anderson is a hard player. I've just come to just accept that even though his max exit is not impressive, his barrel rate is league average, that he puts the ball in play, and BABIP is a skill, like kind of like what you said about Seager. Over time, you come to accept like he's gonna run a high BABIP. Whatever it is about his spray chart or velocities that, so he continued to post a really good batting average. And not dissimilar from Bichette, he is in the midst of a great, one of the, top 3 or 4 lineups, in the American League, if not the Major League Baseball. So really great run producer, 2020 type player, really reliable, A health grade. So I'll stop there. I can't remember. I know you mentioned Lindor and Anderson. I can't remember if you mentioned Franco Story buys. So I will just stop there and see where we are.
So Story, I did mention, just in that he had a down year last year and still went 2020. We don't know where he's playing next year, but I thought about the fact that Coors is not a home run friendly park necessarily, and he still hit 20 plus home runs. So I think he plays everywhere, and power plays outside of Coors. And so even if his average goes down a bit, he's still 2020, and that's something to consider. I actually had Baez as a second baseman, but if I had him as a shortstop, he'd probably be in that same area with Seager, for me, with Seager and Anderson, kind of that 7, 8, 9 area. So the other one that you brought up you brought up Wander Franco, and you brought up Dansby Swanson. And so Wander Franco, for me, he's an 80 hit tool, but that's it right now, right? So we can expect 290 to 300 from him, and it wouldn't surprise for him to go past 300, but I don't know that he's reaching 20 home runs, and he's certainly not reaching 10 stolen bases even. So what makes him even close to Tim Anderson, right? Tim Anderson at least is kind of 15-15, potentially 20-20 with 300 batting average. Wander for the moment is probably 300 batting average and 15-10 or 15-5. I think over time, Wander's hit tool will remain, and we'll see him hit for more power. If there's a 330 home run season in Wander Franco, that wouldn't surprise me at all. In fact, I expect it for a number of years in his prime. But right now, age 21, age 22, he's a 300 hitter with not nearly as much power as Tim Anderson. So there's a lot of hype, I think, because he was the number 1 overall prospect, and he came up and really did dominate the last couple months of the season. There's what it costs to draft him right now. His current ADP is, according to Fantrax, is 43.57. So in our league, that's 3rd round, right? And Tim Anderson's current Fantrax ADP is 57.13. So that's a good 13 and a half picks after Wander Franco, but Tim Anderson is in all likelihood the superior player. So Franco,
I would agree, and I have them ranked as such. I have Anderson ranked ahead of Franco. Yeah,
right? Franco to me is a lot of hype and wanting to have the next cool young player, but he's not the equivalent of a Tim Anderson And then we can talk about Dansby Swanson, but for me, he's my number 13 shortstop. Below,
He was my number 12.
yeah,
So
so
we're pretty close.
below Brendan Crawford, below Willie Adames, below Bobby Witt Jr., and then Franco and Tim Anderson and all the rest. What is it you see in Swanson that gets you to rank him where you do?
Well, he was my last player in this tier, number 12 overall. I have him just ahead of Crawford. And then then there's 3 young guys to wrap out my top 16 for redraft. There's nothing really, honestly, that gets me excited. He's an accumulator. He plays every day.
100%.
His quality, his barrel rate and velocity is good, but he's a mid 20s, 25, 26% strikeout rate. Doesn't walk a ton, but he has enough pop, and he does. His sprint speed is respectable enough where he's going to contribute there as well. So I wouldn't want to necessarily build around him best, in this 12-13 range. Again, with the plate appearances, I expect him to host 8. He's someone I have a hard time rostering.
Yep.
I just never get excited about him. And yet I look at the end of the season, he's almost always in that like 8 to 12 range in terms of finishing. He posts it year after year.
27 home runs, 88 RBIs is not anything to sneeze at, right?
Yeah.
The first line I wrote in my blog when I was ranking shortstop was durability is a skill. And I think that's the easiest way to describe Dansby Swanson is durability is a skill. Between 2017 and 2021, 2020 COVID year notwithstanding, he had 551, 533, 545, and 653 plate appearances. So he's going to play every day, right? He plays adequate defense for the Braves. He's going to play every day. He's going to hit some homers. And that is certainly worth something, right? If someone wanted to argue with me that they would rather pick Dansby Swanson over Corey Seager, that's a conversation worth having. If Corey Seager is a health risk and he's going to give you 350 at bats versus 600, Swanson might be the better player.
Yep.
Maybe it's a bias of mine or a blind spot, but the Dansby Swanson type of player is not a player that I have typically rostered on my teams. I could probably use one. So your last, go ahead.
On Wander, he's second to Trey Turner in terms of expected hits at the position. And I understand what you're saying about the power. And I think, I do have Anderson above him, and I'm pretty definitive in that. I think where I would challenge my own ranking is should I drop him out below Story and Baez? Right. Baez has a track record. I keep expecting Baez to fall off, but fall off the table because of his plate skills. But last year, he was second to only Tatis in barrel rate at his position, and power, as I said at the top, carries the day for me at this position. So I could make an argument probably I had to push him up. I had to push myself to push him up higher.
Right.
And so I think maybe there's an opportunity if I had to move Wander down below Baez and Story. Story is a tough rank for me. Again, kind of a mid-20s K rate. Walks a little bit more than Swanson. But I just don't, he consistently posts OPS and like the high 700s, like 790, 780. And he does put up those impactful home runs and steals, and he's such a good athlete. And maybe that's one of those things where I'm biased because I thought he would be better than he has been, because he could throw 100 and all that stuff when he came up. But yeah, I think Wander needs to move down. I just think he's going to get some more power because of his bat control. And I think, like you said, he's a contender to lead the league in batting average, and he will be in the middle of the lineup. I think the Rays led the American League in runs last year. I didn't realize that because of the way they mix and match, and so no one is a superstar in fantasy. But I think they're underrated in terms of their production, and he's going to be in the middle of it for a full season for the first time with major league experience. And I just, he's going to get to more power, and whether it's in 2022. But yeah, I think your challenge him on that, your challenge on to me is correct. I think he needs to move down a little bit. Definitely below Baez because Baez is power, but it's just hard for me to rank someone who has a 12% strike rate and a projected 843 OPS underneath someone who has a 34% strikeout and is projected to be 763. But the reality is this is fantasy, and home runs and steals matter. So that's the struggle that that I have. So.
All right. So remind me again who your last three.
Yeah. So my last group in here. So I have Crawford. You know, his batted ball profile and what he did for the Giants last year. They signed him to a 4-year extension, and Luciano isn't knocking on the door yet. So I don't see anything, even though he's 35, that says to me that his role is going to be drastically different in 2022. And, you know, with that quality of contact and the volume of playing time, projected 786 OPS. I know he did well for your team last year when you played him in Tatis instead when he was hurt.
Yeah, I couldn't trade him for anything.
Yeah, for the 13th shortstop, I felt like he was worthy of a 13th position there.
Right. So interestingly, he's one of those that, because he doesn't carry any name value, couldn't trade him. I was out of contention, and I had this player that I could trade for draft picks the next year, or a prospect who was killing it, and nobody wanted him because it was Brandon Crawford, right? And it wasn't the sexy name. Well, look at his final slash. It was 298, 373, 895. And he had 24 home runs, 90 RBIs. He had 11 steals as a 34-year-old. I couldn't trade him for anything. I literally couldn't trade him. He increased his launch angle by 2 degrees last year. He increased his barrel rate. The one thing that I can't see him doing again is having 11 steals. He's entering his age 35 year. He was at the 25th percentile in sprint speed. But to your point, like, they don't really have, like, they're waiting for Marco Luciano to be his heir apparent, or, you know, make it to the major leagues, but that's not coming until 23 or 24. And so, you know, that Crawford's going to get 500, 550 plate appearances next year. And I think you can count on 20 home runs from him. So for me, he's my number 12. He's between Willy Adames and Dansby Swanson. But, you know, if I have Brandon Crawford as my starting shortstop, and I can take him so his current Fantrax ADP is 207. If I can take him at pick 207, I'm happy. I'm super happy. If I miss out on Tatis and Bichette and, you know, some of the tier 3 guys that I really like, right, or I have to overpay for one of them, I'd much rather have Crawford at pick 207 than have, you know, an overdraft in Bogarts or Correa or Story or one of those guys. So my last 4, you said your last couple are young guys. Mine are the opposite. I have the most boring bottom of redraft shortstops that you could ever imagine. So my 14 is Gleyber Torres. 15, so this is my tier 5. Gleyber Torres at 14, Ahmed Rosario at 15, and Miguel Rojas at 16. Torres is, I don't know if you went back and looked at his 2019, but Gleyber Torres hit 38 home runs in 2019. Like, he was the next absolute superstar in New York.
Yeah.
Last year he hit 259 with a 697 OPS and 9 home runs, and has become kind of a you know, run a little bit, contribute a couple of home runs, sort of middle infielder. His exit velocity last year was 15th percentile. I don't know what happened to his power. I don't know why he's, you know, such a kind of pop gun shortstop at this point, but you have to give him some credit for having power a couple years ago, right? And there's talent there. We all know there's talent there. He's a highly rated prospect, but I don't know. He's not somebody I'm picking. I'm putting him at 14 because of what he's done in the past, not because of where I think he's going to be. You
I
laughing?
can't quit laughing. I can't quit laughing at the pop gun shortstop.
He is. He's a pop gun shortstop. I don't know how else to put it. What did I write? I wrote something silly about him. I said,
Oh my gosh, that's gonna be
so
like I'm gonna go.
my final paragraph on Torres is Gleyber Torres's average exit velocity and launch angle have decreased every year since 2019. His average exit velocity was 15th percentile last year, hard hit 26th, and barrel percent 43rd. Coupled with a 28% chase rate, Torres is too selective, and when he does hit, he doesn't hit the ball very hard. He is morphed from a power hitting middle infielder to a clever base running little pop middling veteran. His Fantrax ADP must have a New York tax New York tax added, because I cannot see picking Torres before pick 200 or maybe 250. That's what I wrote about Gleyber Torres. And I think it's right. There's got to be some sort of New York tax on him because he's garbage at this point.
I think people are holding on to not necessarily the 38 home runs, but they're just saying, okay, this guy has pedigree, he's going to play, and they're going to move him off of short, so he won't be in his head about being such a bad defender, and he only strikes out low 20s, and he's going to walk a decent amount, and he gives you 10 steals and 15 home runs,
right?
And he plays in New York,
right.
But that's not much,
right?
At this position, that puts you at a deficit,
right? Yeah,
I'd consider him at second. I would not consider him at short.
It's for me hard pass at both. I just I don't see it there. Rosario is my 15. I think he does have some skill. So he had with last year, he had 11 home runs and 13 steals. He doesn't hit the ball hard at all. It's 8th percentile for barrel rate and 10th percentile for chase rate. So he chases everything. He doesn't hit it very hard. He also has prospect pedigree. And I think the Cleveland Guardians are looking to have him in the lineup for, 600 at bats, 600 plate appearances. Do I see much upside with him? Not necessarily, but when I see double-digit home runs and double-digit steals, it's somebody who's worth rostering at some point in time. It just depends on where you get him. And then my 16 was Miguel Rojas, same idea, 9 home runs, 13 steals. He's going to play shortstop for the Marlins for the time being. Just a placeholder. If you pick him, you're going to want to pick a Jose Barrero or someone who has some upside who can potentially replace him later on in the year. But he was my number 16. Who do you have in that bottom group?
Yeah, so my thinking here after Crawford is honestly, the guys you mentioned I had as honorable mentions, Rosario, Rojas. I had them outside the top 16. Mm-hmm. I think what I would do, the players I have here would be guys I would consider, and then I would go to the second base pool and get a guy who's available at short. I think looking at second, there's a lot more. There's guys who I like a lot more than the Rosarios and the Rojases who are available at second and short, and I would get one of them and then put them at short, and then maybe grab one of these young kids and see if they hit, and maybe move them into short later on in the year. So
I didn't know it was a possibility with this conversation.
Well, I'm just explaining why I ranked them where I did. I don't much think I would go. That's how I'd approach. If I was in this position and if I didn't have a shortstop, that's what I would do. I'd go to the second base pool. But my last 3 were Jazz, who I know you had a second, Bobby Witt, and O'Neal Cruz. I expect Witt and Cruz to both be in the majors this year. Both of them, Witt probably has projected to have a little less swing and miss, although I know Cruz made really significant improvements and he has a higher power ceiling. I don't want to go 9 rounds on Jazz. My defense on Jazz is that at every level he would come up, he would struggle, and he would get better the following year.
Mhm.
He does have good plate skills. His trace rate is just above league average. It's not egregious. However, I fully acknowledge he could be in AAA in June. That's absolutely within the realm of possibilities.
Yep.
But most projection systems who are, and they are by nature conservative, have him as a 2020 player. And so as the 14th first shortstop, if that's his floor, even if he hits 210,
Mhm.
I think that's not, and he has a track record of getting better.
Sure.
And the plate skills aren't a complete wreck. He's not
They're-
chasing everything.
they're
So
close.
the
They're
risk,
close.
I agree with, it's a coin flip, you know,
Yeah.
I know he's a coin flip, but again, if the base skill is 2020 or 2015, and
Right.
that's the floor, and getting demoted to try to work on his swing. And then I think, you know, Bobby Witt and O'Neill Cruz, for all their potential, you know, Jazz has started the major league learning curve that they're about to start at. So
Sure.
he has a little bit of a head start.
Yeah.
Maybe they adjust quicker. Maybe they don't have the issues that he has had. But he also has had a lot of success, to be fair. So they all have potential. They're all super exciting.
Yep.
They all have swing and miss in their game, and they all have power. So they're really fun. I'm excited to see all three of them this year. I cannot wait.
I agree. I had Witt at 10. He was in the same tier as Wander Franco, Adames, Brandon Crawford, and Dansby Swanson. I think he's 15-15 in his sleep, in the same way that Jazz is, you know, 2020 and hitting 210. I could see Witt as, you know, 250 with 15-15 in his sleep, with a ton more upside for power. I think he has more power upside, well, obviously more power upside than Jazz does, probably a little bit less speed upside, but Bobby Witt Jr. is, in a redraft, I'm not super excited about. I would be excited because I would watch Royals games and it would be fun to, you know, to follow him on MLB TV, but not from a, you know, if we're talking about like our NFBC team and we're trying to approach this in a very smart, kind of methodical, statistics based, like remove our bias, not be emotional sort of way, Bobby Witt Jr. is not your pick, right? Bobby Witt Jr. is because you want to follow him and you're excited, or you're in a dynasty and, like, you know, 3 years from now, he's a top 5 player potentially. But in a redraft, no way. I have him at 10. I would probably consider Adames and Crawford before Witt. It would be dependent on my roster construction. If I didn't need speed, if I had speed previously, I'd probably take Adames or Crawford before I took Witt. There's too much sweetness in his profile currently, but a super exciting player and a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
I don't even know who you are anymore. You have him close to Wander Franco. I don't.
I have Witt. Yeah, I have Witt. Right. I have Witt below Franco. Yes, Franco at 9, Witt at 10 in tier 4. And then
Real time, I made an adjustment. I moved Story up to 9, Bias to 10, and Franco to 11, but I refuse to move him any lower.
That's funny. So honorable mention, I have Jonathan VR, who's not yet signed, but I think a really good resource for cheap homers and steals. Jose Barrero of the Reds, JP Crawford of the Mariners. I think Crawford could hit leadoff potentially. He's not going to produce anything special. He might hit 10 home runs. He's not stealing any bases, but he could score 100 runs for you if he hits at the top of the Mariners lineup. Paul DeJong, Alcides Escobar of all people, only because he could accumulate 550 plate appearances for the Nationals, for whatever that's worth. Nicky Lopez, who we haven't really talked about much, but he's cheap steals and nothing else. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, who will not necessarily get the same amount of time that he did prior to Corey Seager and Marcus Semien. You can make the case that he's the reason why they signed Seager and Semien, because he's that bad.
You're saying he's not. So you're saying he's not a better hitter than Corey Seager?
Unless Corey Seager gets hurt, we'll see what happens. And then Andres Jimenez, Nico Horner, and Tyler Walls. Jimenez is an interesting power speed combo that in a perfect world could give you 12-12 or 15-15, but not something I would count on. And Taylor Walls is going to run. Like he's actually, he attempts steals, and he would be a really kind of end of the draft pick to give you a couple of cheap steals along the way. But those are my honorable mention. You have anything
right.
with redraft before we move on to dynasty?
No, I do not.
All right, so dynasty, if we can take it real quickly, what big changes do you have in dynasty versus redraft? I assume
Big
Tatis
changes.
is one.
He is indeed. You're gonna love this, given our just conversation. My biggest changes I have for dynasty,
Mhm,
the next 10 years,
mhm.
I have Franco at number 2 after Tatis.
Uh-huh.
Other than that, the order is pretty much static through the tiers. The others, I'm looking for other changes.
Mhm.
The other changes in the bottom third, I had I removed Crawford and I added Jose Barrero. So down in the bottom there, I have Witt, Cruz, Jazz, and Barrero
Uh-huh.
in that order. Witt being the highest of those.
Witt, Cruz, Jazz, Barrera.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yep.
Interesting.
I would necessarily, like, I don't know if I would trade them for anyone in the top 6, but like certainly after Bichette, and
Mhm.
if I was looking to rebuild, I might trade. The way I was thinking about this, would I trade Tim Anderson for O'Neill Cruz for
Right.
2022? No, but if I was trying to win the next 2 to 3 years, probably not. But if I'm taking a longer view, might I do that? You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
So I don't know. I'm still trying to find like what's my approach to these. I
Right.
felt like all those young guys need to be represented,
Right.
but it was hard for me to rank them above because I just have all of them are either on the cusp or on their very early parts of their major league career.
Right.
It's hard to rank them above guys who have that track record or in their peak and say these guys are better holds in dynasty. So.
Right. So Tatis was my number 1 in my first tier and by himself. My second tier, I had Witt number 2, Bichette 3, and Wander 4. I do believe in Witt. I think that he has swing and miss right now. I don't know that swing and miss remains down the road. Bichette and Wander, I went back and forth. I only listed Bichette as number 3 because he has a proven season under his belt. I think Wander's the better player. I would take Wander in a real life GM, but Bichette's steals put him above Wander for me right now. My next tier is more interesting. I've got Bogaerts at 5. I think he has 3 or 4, 290, 300 seasons left in him with 25, 30 home runs. My number 6 is Marcelo Mayer. I'm just a believer. I think Marcelo Mayer is Xander Bogaerts again for another 10 seasons, right? He's 290, 300, 25, 30 home runs, middle of the order hitter. If he hits 3rd or 4th, or 5th, he's scoring 90 to 100 runs and he's driving in 100 runs. He's that kind of hitter. Trevor Story is after Mayer. I'm gambling he ends up in Houston. I think if he ends up in Houston, he hits 30 home runs. Lindor and Correa round out that tier. Lindor for me is I think he's underrated. And next year, he may not get back to where he needs to be, but I think over time, he's going to end up proving to be the better player. And then tier 4 for me is Anthony Volpe, Marco Luciano, Corey Seager, Tim Anderson, Khalil Watson, and Willy Adames. I'm not a big Volpe fan, but I felt like he needed to be included based on a lot of kind of the scouts' observations of Volpe over the last year or so. I always question Yankees prospects because I wonder how much helium they get because they're Yankees. Like, what if he was a I don't know. I almost said Oklahoma City Thunder, but that's the wrong sport. But imagine that like he was, a Royals prospect. Like I don't know that Volpe would be seen in the same way. And then Seager, I worry about injury with Seager. Tim Anderson, I think he's going to fall off pretty quickly. Khalil Watson is a good prospect, but I think there's enough question about whether he's going to hit to rank him too high. And then Adames, I think last year, like the second half of last year might be his peak, but he's still worth including on that list. I did not include Noelvi Marte because I don't think he is a shortstop. I think ultimately he gets too big to play short, ends up at third. I feel the same about Brady House. I think Brady House in a pinch could play shortstop, but I think he ends up at third base for the Washington Nationals. The only other player that I thought about a little bit to consider in the top 16 with regards to dynasty is Christian Hernandez. But it's hard to rank someone who is 18 years old in that top 16. But I do think there's a high probability that he ends up being at minimum a star and potentially a superstar, but it's going to take some time for him to get there. So I'm not willing to rank him in that list yet.
That is a really young dynasty list, man. Great props to you that's a bold.
It is. I think so interestingly, one of the conversations that you, me, and Matt have pretty frequently is, how do we think about dynasty prospects, right? And so you tend to be on one side of the spectrum, which is valuing honestly, you value proximity and you value track.
Yeah, I'm bracing myself for what you're going to say next.
No, like you're the guy who'll take the 33-year-old and plug him in at like number 4. And Matt, maybe because of the type of team he's building right now, Matt is all about like young players, right? And tends to, I think, at times overvalue some of the youth because he's dreaming about it. I try to walk the line of like valuing, like looking at a player like Christian Hernandez and scouting him and learning as much as I can about him and trying to assess his value in a very objective way, but also taking a player like Brandon Crawford and saying, you know what, he has value right now. Like, what is he worth to me in the future? I don't know that any of us are correct, but it's a lot of fun to have a conversation amongst 3 people who have very different approaches, right? I think both extremes are very scary, which is why I try to walk the middle. Like, I don't want to love all the old players. This is not fun. But if you have a team full of prospects, you don't have a team, right? You have a team of fantasy. You don't have a team. You don't have a championship team.
Yeah.
And then on my list of non-top 16 players that I considered for dynasty, I've got Barrero, and I've got Horner and Walls at the bottom. It's fascinating because, of the prospects, the top shortstop prospects, besides Marcelo Mayer, I don't know that there are any real guarantees. And so we're ranking all these guys right now, and I included some of them in my dynasty rankings, but they may not even become major leaguers over time. So that brings us to, let's talk about our prospects real quick.
Yeah, let's do it. This is the most fun I had with prospects, with this position.
Awesome.
I felt like I actually had some opinions and reasons for why I rank people where I did.
Nice. So I should say,
I'm really glad.
As a quick caveat, I did not include CJ Abrams in my dynasty because I believe Fernando Tatis Jr. remains at shortstop and Abrams becomes their center fielder. And I think that happens until Tatis is in his late 20s, early 30s. And so had Abrams been included in my shortstop dynasty rankings, I'd probably have him in the same tier as Witt, Bichette, and Wander Franco, because I think he's 40 to 50 steals and 15 home runs and a 300 hitter. So I just wanted to put that out there right now before everybody jumps down my throat about not having CJ Abrams in that dynasty rankings.
Well, I don't have him at this position either, so they can jot down my throat as well.
Sweet. So what do
Yeah,
you?
so I'm really intrigued that you like Marcelo Myers so much because I really like him as well. I have him at number 4 on
Me too.
on prospect list, and he's only 19.
Mhm.
And but yeah, I really like him. So going back to the top, I have my top 5 were Witt, and then Cruz, and then Barrero, and then Meyer, and then Watson. I know you mentioned Watson has a lot of swing and miss. I've just read such divisive opinions about him. One scout who I really trust said that he had a great mix of approach and power, especially for his size. He had good raw power. And then another site said that he was like a 40 in terms of bat control and pitch selection. So I didn't know what to make, but I know that he was considered to be like one of the best athletes in the draft last year,
Right.
and I liked his profile better than a lot of the guys below. But anyway, what was your top 5?
So I had Witt 1, Abrams 2. I'm keeping Abrams there in shortstop prospects because I don't know they're moving him, that if they're moving him right now. But over time for Dynasty, I have him moving to the outfield. I have Noelvi Marte at 3, same idea. I think he has more chance to stick at short, not because of the type of player he is, but because of the makeup of the Mariners organization. Meyer is my number 4. And then Marco Luciano is my number 5. Anthony Volpe is 6, O'Neill Cruz 7, Khalil Watson 8, Brady House 9, Jordan Lawler 10. House I don't think is going to stick at short, but I'm going to keep him there for now. So Marco Luciano is a hard one to peg. I think he's got tremendous power, tremendous upside. He had a down year in 2021. Nobody really knows what to make of it, but he's going to get a chance to be Crawford's heir apparent, like we talked about. I think in 23 we could see if Luciano has a good 2022, we can see him in 23 as the starting shortstop in San Francisco. Path and opportunity is as important as talent is, as far as I'm concerned. He could be an accumulator like Swanson, right? Dansby Swanson is not on our top 16 because he's good. He's on their top 16 because he has opportunity. I have Volpe at 6. I get his statistics in 2021 were great. I can't, I've gone too far the other way, but my anti-Yankees bias is not going to raise him any higher than that. Noelvi Marte at 3. He's a hitter. Everywhere along the way he's hit. And when you look at other prospect rankings, if you do a composite ranking of Noelvi Marte, he's in the top 15 overall. And you can't really sneeze at that. So for me, I think Marcelo Mayer is a safer bet, but I think Noelvi Marte is a bigger upside bet. And then I have O'Neill Cruz at 7, Khalil Watson at 8. O'Neill Cruz is such a wild card. Who knows? Based on these rankings, I as much see him as a 40 home run hitter as I do seeing him as a right fielder. I think ultimately he ends up in right field. They have, they have middle infield prospects who are coming up pretty soon, and whether he can conceivably stick at shortstop or not, I don't think it's whether he can. I think it's more about they have other players who can play shortstop better. And if he is that much of a power hitter, you're better off keeping him healthy and having him focus on hitting than you are having him play shortstop. But I don't doubt that he's at minimum a 30 home run hitter. I'm super excited to see O'Neill Cruz. Khalil Watson, Brady House, Jordan Lawler, they're all, 3 years away. I think Watson is the most well-rounded of the three. I know, like I said, there is some swing and miss, but I think he's going to figure that out and be a very productive shortstop. Brady House has tremendous power upside. Jordan Lawler's a good athlete who was a great prep player, but I rank him 10 in large part because of the Arizona organization. I just don't trust them to nurture his talent and see it through to a place where he's a viable major league shortstop in the near future. His ranking is almost as much about the Arizona management turning over and becoming something different than what it is now as it is about his talent. He's talented enough to have him on the list, but don't trust Arizona. Any other thoughts about prospects from you?
Yeah, I mean, Cruz, the improvement he showed this year just gave me a lot of confidence to move him up. And then with that 80 grade hit tool, I do think there's a real chance he moves to the outfield. But I kept him here. Barrero is something also, like his tools in terms of defense, speed, and raw power are all there. It was just a matter of what can he hit. And he cut his K rate under 22% this past year. So I mean, it was just a guy who could potentially play every day with those kind of base skills if he hits enough to get to that power in that ballpark. It was really it's really interesting profile to me, and that's why I have him at number 3. I tend to overfavor proximity on these types of lists. I think you know that's my bias. I admire. We talked about him, just the overall hitter. Watson at 5. Volpe, he just he has gotten so much heat, and he kind of popped up out of nowhere. And I've learned from grabbing like guys like this in the past, they don't necessarily hold those games. So I want to see what he does as he moves up another level. And like you, I'm a little bit just questionable. Like, and it's hard because we came out of 2020 where there's no minors, and now you have this guy that comes up, and it's like, so did something change, or it just kind of interrupts the flow and the progress of these young guys. It's just hard to get a read on. So I'm hesitant to move him any higher than that, even though everyone seems to be pushing him.
I don't remember who it was. I think it was RotoWire that had him as high as like number 2 overall with prospects.
I don't understand that.
I don't see it either.
I don't like what I know he had a good year, but and it was a high A though. Or I'm sorry, I'm looking at Marte now. Marte was in high A. But yeah, it wasn't even at the higher levels, and he's never done it before.
Right.
Marte had it 7. Like you, I've read that he may not stay on short, but he has hit everywhere he's been so far, and he's been age appropriate. So I have him at 7. And then for 8, 9, and 10, I was trying to find stars. So I went really young and really toolsy. Christian Hernandez 8. With a 60 hit, 55 raw, 55 speed. It could be, you've talked a lot about him on this pod with good reason. Ellie De La Cruz for Cincinnati. 80 grade power, 70 grade speed. Can he get to it? Will he be able to hit enough? I don't know, but if he shows that this year, he might be in the top 5 this time next year.
Right.
Or he could be off the list altogether. I mean, that's both. And then Wilman Diaz for the Dodgers, international signee, 60 grade hit, 60 grade speed, and 50 game power. So he's another one. I'm really interested to see this year what they do. A couple guys I'm interested in who didn't make my list, but who are going to play this year in the majors, I think, who are interesting but not stars to me are Jeremy Pena.
Yep.
Jeremy Pena and Bryson Stott, but really different players. I mean, Pena is more of he's a plus defender. And he's got power, speed, and a little bit more questionable hit, whereas Stott is more of an on-base, really discerning eye, a high, potential like number 2 type hitter kind of thing, with a little bit of speed and a little bit of pop. But they both play in offensive, friendly environments and might get playing time, and they have nice balanced profiles. I think I'm interested to see what they do. Luciano, it was hard for me to leave him off the list because of his name value. He was young for the level. But it was just hard not to ignore how much he struggled. So at and they tried him at a couple different spots, and he continued to swing and miss a lot. So, and that's not part. I mean, he was ready to have a 55 eye and a 50 hit, and he has not shown that yet. And again, I know they've been aggressive with him, so I don't want to be too hard on him, but it was just hard for me to push him any higher than that.
Yep.
And then my last honorable mention, and we can move on, is just Brian Rocchio. I really like for the Guardians. He has a 60 grade hit tool, 70 grade defense, 60 grade speed. But my reason I didn't rank him in my top 10 is I was really focusing on power. When I looked at, our rankings and what I talked about at the beginning of the pod, it's really power that differentiates you in this position. So I didn't feel that I can rank someone in the top 10 who has a 40 grade raw power.
Right.
Because as much as he may play, and if he brings speed, okay, so what's that going to get you? You're just going to be in that like 8 to 10 range at his peak,
Right.
or if he gets at 90% of his outcome. I really like him as a player, switch hitter, and hopefully he gets to more power, and maybe he can be higher than that. But I wanted to call him out because he had a really great season, and I think we might see him here in the next year and a half or so. But
Sure.
That's my prospect list. Hopefully Matt is proud. Hopefully I didn't leave anybody off.
Well, I know he was waiting. I know he was waiting
mad about
Rocchio, for sure. I know for a fact he was waiting for Rocchio from you. The one thing I would add is Pena and Stott. I would consider over my last tier, which was Gleyber Torres, Ahmed Rosario, and Miguel Rojas. Like, I think based on your team's roster construction, if you have the room to consider upside instead of someone who's going to get at bats, both of those players are worth considering at 14, 15, and 16 for me in a redraft. It's for me specifically Pena. I think Pena is going to have an opportunity, and I really respect what that organization does as far as teaching goes, in the same way that I would the Tampa Bay Rays. So Jeremy Pena is someone to keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah. I wish he had. I feel very much the same. I worry the Phillies are going to do something stupid and block Stott. And I know a lot of people, a lot of writers that are very good at the athletic talk about him getting an opportunity, but they seem to just try to fix every single one of their problems by throwing money at it.
With a Didi Gregorius or who else am I thinking of right now? Gregorius at short, or even bringing up like a Scott Kingery and playing him because they paid him, sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear they have a need there, and he's ready. I question whether they'll follow through and give him that opportunity or not. But his profile is interesting, and again, that's a very offensive friendly environment and a very good lineup, at least the top half of it. So.
I agree. So if I was to take some of the strategy stuff as a bigger bucket, so I asked the question, like, what is your overall shortstop strategy? But I also ask, like, who do you see as the biggest bargain from an ADP standpoint, or like a riser, versus who's being overvalued right now and someone who you would stay away from?
I think, no surprise, I think Bichette is being overvalued. I don't think should be a top 10 pick. I think he's like in that Ozzy Albies kind of range is where he belongs. So he would be the one I think is way overpriced. I think the value, well, that's a good question. I'm going to go with Correa. I think, because he doesn't have a team and, just our experience drafting him this last time, he fell. I was really surprised. I think because he's an Astro, he's not well liked, he's not well regarded. People like to root against them for some legitimate reasons.
Sure.
He doesn't give you any speed, but I think he's falling too far. I think he's a value. If you don't get one of the guys who do have the helium, I think he's a good value.
So from an overall strategy standpoint, I think it's pretty obvious that you want to get one of the top 3 tier guys, right? So it's Tatis, Bichette, Bogaerts, Story, Correa, Lindor, Seager, Anderson. I guess Wander is maybe a part of that group, but that group has a lot of value. And for me, I would wait all the way down to Crawford and Adames. But I want one of those guys for sure, right? And I'm not outside of Tatis, I'm not picking one of those others unless I have a really like definitive belief in that player to be able to surpass what they've done historically. So I guess if I really had to boil it down, it's Tatis or I'm waiting from a value standpoint. And then as far as my riser and faller or someone who is being overvalued and undervalued, my riser is Francisco Lindor. I think the New York press trashed him because of his his salary, the contract that he signed. And we can buy into that as far as what we think of him as a player. But the reality is he averaged 107 runs, 30 home runs, and 20 steals the previous 4 seasons outside of the COVID year, the previous 4 seasons before last year. And he's only 29. And so if you think about that, 100 runs and 30 home runs, 20 steals, like that's probably your number 2, right? That's after my number 2. After Tatis, that's probably the next shortstop. And currently his ADP is 59. So in a 12-team league, that's round 5. In our league, in a 16-team league, that's what, round 4, right? So I think he's being tremendously undervalued. He's got an 18% walk or 11% walk rate, 18% K rate. He never hit below 273 until last season, right? To me, last season is an anomaly. It's whether it's pressure from the New York media or adjustment to National League pitching, he's going to be a lot better than he was last year. He's got a 14.4 degree launch angle, which is very near optimal being between 15 and 20 degrees. 75th percentile for average exit velocity, 87th for max exit, 71st for hard hit, 67th for expected WOBA, 65th for expected slugging. Like he had a 248 BABIP. Everything that I saw reads unlucky and year 1 in a new league with a lot of pressure. So for me, if he's currently my number 6 shortstop based on, my rankings, I would much rather have Lindor as my number 6 and pick him later than I would the guys above him. I think Francisco Lindor is due for a Lindor type year. And when we come to rank these guys next year, he's going to be number 2 or 3. I think it's to me, it's pretty clear when you start to dig. The only thing that he did last year that wasn't great was his swinging strike was 10.5%. And between 16 and 19, he ranged between 6.4 and 7.7%. So his swinging strike jumped tremendously, but that's not the type of thing that jumps because of a deterioration of skill. That's the type of thing that jumps because he was pressing, right? He was trying to be a different player than what he had been previously. So he's my riser. In a redraft, I'm taking him all day long. I'll take him higher than his 59, his current Fantrax ADP of 59. Low 40s if Lindor is available and he works for the players that I've taken previously, like I'm all over him. My faller is Dansby Swanson, in large part just because I think in order to extract value from him, you're expecting him to have 600 plate appearances again. And while he's proven that he can stay healthy up to this point in time, I would rather take someone with skill who might be healthy than someone who has been healthy the last 5 years, because I think chances are he gets hurt eventually, especially as a shortstop. If it was a corner outfielder who had 5 years of 500 plate appearances, then I might be more inclined to expect it from him. But given the fact that he's a shortstop, and that's what you're counting on in order to get value from him, I can't take him at his current 130 Fantrax ADP. So he's my faller. You have any thoughts on those 2?
I love the Lindor poll. Yeah, because like you said, from a skill perspective, he was on. There's something that said he had a decline.
Mhm.
You look at what he did before, and as I mentioned, we were doing ranks. I think he's had his best power output season, but I don't doesn't mean he can't get back to
Right.
more of that 270, 350, 460 type slash line
Right.
that he's routinely posted and outperform someone like a Bichette.
Right.
And his plate skills are really fantastic, and I would love to see him get back to where he was.
Right.
That's a great pull. It sounds like we need to target him in TGFAI to me. So
If he's still available, absolutely we do.
yeah.
So unless you have anything to add to prospects or shortstop strategy or rankings, we are going to enter our open forum segment. Do you have anything else to add? Anything pressing?
I don't. The one note I had that I didn't talk about, Tino, was just this is a position that really likes to swing. I was looking at O swing rates, out of zone swing rates.
Mhm.
The lowest one I saw, we're not going to talk about him. He's not Josh Rojas. Like I'm going to call. There's a couple of 27. So Carlos Correa 27%. Gleyber Torres 27.5. Pop Gun shortstop. But most of them are in the high 20s and low 30s and beyond. And usually at the positions, because I look at this every time we do this, you're going to have your guys who really excel and do not chase.
Right.
You in the low 20s and your outliers in the high teens. So it was just interesting to look at this position where we get so much production from. It's like, man, this is a group that swings the ball or swings the bat a lot.
Right.
And yet when I looked at zone contact, they're all making a lot of contact as well.
Yep.
Um,
So I just did a query for the top 30, like based on the top 36 shortstops from an at-bat standpoint. Taylor Walls was the lowest chase rate at 22%. So there was nobody in the teens from a chase rate standpoint based on the shortstops that I have in my database. Highest being Jose Iglesias at 47%. But you're right. Like Bichette was 43 and Tim Anderson was 41. And we've got a bunch of them in the 30%. And they're just the majority of the shortstops that had plate appearances were in like the 30% range. I think there's only, from what I can see, there's only 8 in my database who were below 30%.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Yeah. So it was just interesting to see it's like such a position wide approach. I just hadn't seen that as we've gone through these positions. You just normally have the normal spread, and this one just seemed to be pushed all towards swing, and again with impressive contact rates to boot.
Right.
And again, as from a fantasy analysis standpoint, we rely on this position so much for production, and so. And we study that as something like, hey, these are players that there are holes in their approach that you might want to expect a decline or overperformance. And so it was just very interesting. That's my last point. That's all I have. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a fascinating position for me. I love the offense at short. Historically, we haven't seen this kind of offense at shortstop. I love to see a lot of the, kind of big offensive players in the pipeline. It'll be super interesting to see what prospects come up. I love some of the prospects that are coming up, and I don't some of the others. But to your point, like I think both of us tend to gravitate towards the high walk, low chase, good bat to ball skill players, and shortstop doesn't offer a ton of those. So it forces us to jump outside of our comfort zone and question some of our biases when it comes to evaluating shortstop talent. Super interesting to me. My open forum question for you is, do you have a favorite baseball memory as a kid? Like playing baseball, whether it's like a formal team or not? Is there something that stands out to you or something you want to share that's a fun memory?
I do have one. The six immediately comes to mind, and I think I've already shared it on the pod before, so it's not original.
Uh-huh.
But we used to watch the black and white old home run derbies on ESPN Classic,
Yeah.
and then we would go in the backyard, and we lived in a split level home, and we would draw the strike zone on the concrete of the split level because we didn't have a catcher. And then that was ball and strike. And then we would play home run derby with like 3 or 4 of us in the neighborhood. So we'd have one person go get the ball, a pitcher, and then we'd take turns hitting. And we would keep track of how many balls that were home runs. Um, that that immediately came to mind when you asked me of something that was just kind of youthful, joyful. Again, I remember watching those black and white old school home run derby videos that they would air, and then going out and like emulating that. Nothing like what the home run derby is now, with those old versions of that. But that's the first memory that came to mind for me. What about you? Still there?
Yeah, I'm here. First of all, that's awesome. I love it. For me, man, so played baseball until I was 18. Tons and tons of memories. We'll share it along the way. I'd say the big one, or the first one that comes to mind, is, I think I shared this with you a little bit. So in elementary school, my buddies and I used to play home run derby in an old tennis court of, well, 2 tennis courts of a girls' Catholic high school. And this is so like the stereotypical like 80s kids running around sort of story, but we literally would bring a transistor radio, our notebook with plastic sheets, like the 3x3 plastic sheet for the baseball cards, like our notebook with the plastic sheets and cards in it. It was like, McGuire Olympic card and Griffey, I guess it wasn't even Griffey at that point. It was more like Benito Santiago 87 Donruss rated rookie and Bo Jackson rated rookie. And we'd bring our cards and our baseball bat and our mitt and tennis balls. And we played home run derby while listening to ball games on the radio in this tennis court. And so we would try to pitch to each other for real. And we would count home runs, who hit the most home runs. And when all the tennis balls went over the fence, then we'd have to go and retrieve them and come back. But what's crazy is, like, my 3rd grade best friend, Keith Driscoll, was only in Seattle for 1 year. His family had moved from Vermont for his dad's job, and then they moved back to Vermont after 1 year. But Keith was like a huge part of home run derby. And Stephen Weller was an adopted Korean kid who lived across the street from center field, who played with us sometimes when he saw us out there, but he was a couple of years older. And then Jake Dutton, this is the cool one. So Jake Dutton, freckle-faced, like Irish kid, who was a year older than me and had total like uppercut, like Dave Kingman type swing, always struck it. But Jake is like, basically, outside of like Kanye West, is like the #1 hip hop producer in the world. Like, has produced for everybody, like Nipsey Hussle and Drake and like on and on. So he and Mayor Hawthorne from Detroit have this group called Tuxedo, and they do like early 80s funk. Amazing band. If you haven't listened to Tuxedo, like, their music is just dope. It makes you want to dance. It's super funky, super awesome. But Jake Dutton was like one of my best friends growing up. And we traded cards. Like, we were both raised by single mothers, and we traded cards, and like home run derby was like me and Jake. We were like 2 of the major like players in home run derby at Holy Names in Seattle. And so I have these childhood memories of like literally bringing my bat like over my shoulder with my mitt hanging from it, in my notebook in my backpack that had my like Benito Santiago rated rookie, and Bo Jackson rated rookie. And, Barry Bonds tops, 87 rookie card, and whatever random cards we had that we loved. But we would just go and have our radio and listen to the game and play home run derby for all day and night. But to me, that's like one of the most early formative memories of playing like young baseball. And it's funny to think about in hindsight, because like I said, Jake is like a big deal now. And Keith Driscoll, I never heard from since we were 9 years old, but it's something that I remember. And it's the type of memory that I wish the current young generation could experience, because it was very formative and very fun. And then, after doing that, we would, you would see on TV like the old school remakes of like the Willie Mays 1950s, early 60s home run derbies that used to be on ESPN. And we would try to replicate some of the announcing and like the format and all that stuff. It was just super fun, but really, really, really fun childhood memory of playing baseball. One of the many. It's the greatest game as far as I'm concerned. Like absolutely the greatest game. You got anything else for this pod?
Yeah, I got a question for you. It's specific to our draft that we're doing that we talked about to kick off the show. I just wondered if, and I think people who are listening might also find this interesting since they might make similar choices.
Mhm.
The KDS that we did, so drafting, we picked our draft spot, or we gave preference. And I think it's played out okay.
Uh-huh.
But I'm curious. I have a thought, and I just wanted to see, as we have gone through this experience now, as we're working through it, both from a player availability standpoint and also the pacing of the picks, how often it is between our picks. Have you thought about, as we move towards TGFBI, like adjusting that, or are you still open, or have you not thought about it? I'm just curious.
No, I have. I think that this year, it's more where you pick is determinant on, or determines the philosophy, but doesn't determine whether you win or not, right? Some years you might have a big top four, and if you're not in the top four, like you're screwed, right? Or it might be that, there isn't a big top couple, and if you pick one, your team is going to be shot because whoever you pick at 23 or 23 and 24 just like are so much below the depth that the guy who picked on the wheel at 12 and 13 picked up. I think this year there are different approaches for different picks that are equally viable, right? So if you get Tatis or Turner and you get steals and power, and you're going to pick at 23, and you go get an ace, right? Or you get a really great outfielder in that range, I think you're set. I think for us, we take Acuna, and we've ended up with a really balanced, really skilled team because we picked at 7. If I'm picking on the wheel, I think there are plenty of really good players on the wheel. So to answer your question, I think that there are a lot of good options. I think you have to stick to not the narrative, but stick to kind of what is convention for those positions in order to make them work. If we tried to go off convention at 7 outside of Trout, right? Say we went, Garrett Cole or Corbin Burns or someone like that at 7, like our offense wouldn't be very good. So I think it's a lot different. Yeah, I think at 7, you have to pick a good offensive player and stay offense and try to lean on your ability to pick pitching, right? If you're picking on the wheel, chances are you're going to take a pitcher and you're going to have good pitching and good hitting. And that's just kind of that's what the position dictates. So at least for the first couple of rounds, if you can stick with convention and pick what the round is telling you to pick, or the pick is telling you to pick, you're fine. Again, like other years, that doesn't happen nearly as much. Other years, you might have a big top four, and then if you're not picking top four, you're not winning. But I was happy. I think Acuna is we're only getting Acuna at 7 because of his injury. If it's
Yeah,
not
exactly. That was a value. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, my thought has been, I don't know how much longer that's going to last. So it would mean it's realistic to think that we could get him with that service, that type of pick again.
Right.
And also, I underestimated how valuable or how valued Ramirez was. I thought we might have a chance at him there, and he went, I think, 3 or
Well,
4, and then
top 4 consensus.
looking at an ADP like that, I just missed on that, and so that's made me wonder: should we push for either like a 1-2 type position where we can get Tatis or Ramirez, or would we want to move more towards the back of the round, knowing that Acuna option is probably not going to be there, or it's not going to be there in the late teens. And then my other thought is, I would like our picks to be closer together. I feel like we have more an opportunity to get done picking 2 players within 2 to 3 to maybe at the most spread like 5 or 6 picks. Like going like 11 to 14, or that much space, like being in the middle. I don't know. I have not, I'm say enjoyed. I've just found that to be, I feel like I'm reacting more. We have a great plan, so it's not completely reactive, but I'm just kind of waiting to see, are they going to be taken? Are they going to be taken? Are they going to be taken? Whereas if the picks are closer together, you can kind of have a better sense of, okay, I just picked this. I'm going to turn around and have another pick, and then we can, based on how the board turns, make a quicker adjustment and get that person and not have to wait so long to see if it would work out. I don't know.
See,
Just a couple of thoughts I've had.
It's interesting you say that, because I have the exact opposite reaction to where we're picking and how it's turned out. I think because, well, one, because there's 2 of us and we're working together. It gives us the opportunity between each pick to actually have a legitimate conversation about who we want to pick and why. And it's not just, hey, like, this is who I want, this is who you want, we're under the gun, let's pick this guy. It's more like, here's why I think Dylan Cease is worth picking here. And I want you to dig into these 3 statistics, right? Or here's why Ke'Bryan Hayes is the right pick in this position. Like, think about these 4 things. If we didn't have the time or the opportunity to have those conversations, we wouldn't be able to learn as much from each other. But I think because we have such a large amount of time to actually have a conversation, it allows us to learn from one another and make arguments.
Right. That's a good point.
We do. And I think it's part of the reason why we've constructed the team that we have, right? Like, I wonder if we would have picked Correa if we had limited time. Would we gone more conventionally and picked a player that filled a role as opposed to the best available player if we couldn't have the conversation? We kind of went unconventional with our pitching. We have Musgrove, Dylan Cease, and Yu Darvish as our top 3. Like, would we have picked Musgrove and Cease as our 1-2 if we didn't have a conversation to say, here's what I found, here's what I want you to dig into, let me know if like I'm seeing something wrong, and let's come back together in, whenever you can, to talk about it. I think the more time we have, you and I specifically, the more time not to call us smart, but the more time 2 smart people have to debate and figure out where they stand together, I think the better off you are in terms of coming to the right conclusion.
That's very fair.
Well,
I appreciate your thoughts.
One super quick thought in relation to this is, so the soccer team, Lyon from France, historically, like I think they won 7 straight French league titles in soccer in the teens, 2010 and on. Maybe it was the aughts and the teens combined, but the big thing that they did that allowed them to dominate was they decided that having one manager, which is what most soccer teams do, having one manager make all the personnel decisions about who to sign and who to have on your team. They said, if you have more people having a conversation about who the right players are to have, and you come about a conclusion in a democratic kind of manner where there are more opinions, you are more likely to come up with the right decision about a player. They also decided that selling players, they would assess a value to a player, and once that value was offered for that player, they would sell them or trade them regardless of how tied to that player they were, or how much the fan base was admired that player or wanted that player, right? So they went about it in a very scientific and cutthroat way. But I bring it up because I think it's really telling when they said, if we have like a board of 14 people and their jobs are to evaluate the players that we're talking about acquiring,
Okay.
a consensus from 14 people about the talent level of a player is going to be more accurate than the opinion of one manager. It's 14 people deciding on something as a group versus one person making a decision where there's potentially more bias and more opinion. And so when I think about that, that idea really stands out to me because they just dominated French soccer. They absolutely dominated once they made that decision to incorporate more opinions with a process. So when I think about you and I having what we try to have objective conversations about who to pick, we always come to a conclusion that I feel is much more advanced and informed than the conclusion that I might have come to if it was just me. Because it's two smart, educated people who have invested time and energy in understanding who a player is. We don't always agree, but we trust each other's judgment and we have really legitimate conversations. So for me, the more time we have to have that conversation and the more we value each other's opinions equally, right, the better conclusion we're going to come to. In the same way that Lyon, once they started to incorporate more educated opinions, started to win. So I think there's a tremendous amount for us to learn from each other in that process. And it's been really informative to me because some of the picks I wouldn't have made if it was just me, right? I would have picked Byron Buxton much earlier. And it's not to say that Byron Buxton isn't a great player. It's just to say that I love him.
Right.
And I can't play without him in the same way I can't play without Yohan Moncada. So no, I really love this process and I learned a ton. And it's been really, really fun for me to go through, not just picking the player, but having the conversations as to why. It's been super cool.
Awesome.
Super cool.
More to come. All right, man.
You got anything else?
Nope.
Cool. All right, so I think next week we'll do top 16 in the outfield. So our outfield 1 in our leagues. I know we're both anxious to get to pitching, but I think it's important to do the, outfield 1, 2, and 3. Maybe we do outfield 1 and then starter 1, something like that.
Okay.
But yeah, next week is outfield 1. Be super fun. We'll hit our prospects the one time and go from there. Man, can't wait for baseball. Can't wait for baseball. It's gonna be awesome. Miss you, brother. Appreciate it. Awesome.
Night, friend.
All right, talk soon.